The sun had barely crested the jagged ridge of the Sierra Blanca when Naya, a 16-year-old Apache girl, slipped silently into the forest. She moved like the wind, barefoot, cautious, alert, gathering herbs for her grandmother's medicine bundle. Her dark braids swung gently over her shoulders as she paused beneath the tall pines, listening to the stillness of the morning. But that stillness cracked like brittle bark underfoot when she heard it. A whisper, faint, broken. She froze, heart lurching in her chest. Every instinct told her to run. Spirits wandered these woods, her elders warned, angry ones, restless ones. Voices that called out in sorrow only to pull the living into their graves. She heard it again, clearer this time. Help me. It came from the direction of a moss-covered rise beneath a tangled thicket of fallen branches. Trembling, Naya crept forward. The sound wasn't natural. It didn't come from an animal. It didn't come from any man she could see. And yet, someone was there, kneeling. She brushed away twigs and leaves, then clawed at the soft, damp dirt. Her hands stung with cold and scraped roots, but she didn't stop. And then she saw him. Man's face, caked in mud, bruised, barely recognizable. His cracked lips trembled with every breath. For a moment, Naya gasped and backed away. He looked more corpse than man. His pale eyes opened slowly, unfocused, landing on her face with a strange familiarity. His mouth moved. "Tell Clara," he rasped. "I forgive her." Then his eyes rolled back and his head fell to the side. Naya sat frozen. That name, Clara, it struck her deep in her chest, though she didn't know why. Her mother had once mentioned a Clara, in whispers, in stories cut short by pain and tears. Could it be the same? But there wasn't time to think. The man's breathing was shallow, his skin too cold. He was dying. She acted quickly. Pulling his shoulders free, she braced herself and heaved. He was heavy, broad-shouldered, with the leather vest of a cattleman, now shredded and bloodied. Dragging him was nearly impossible, but she remembered an old hunter's shelter not far off, an abandoned lean to hidden beneath thick pine cover. With aching arms and scraped knees, Naya dragged the man there, inch by inch, over roots and rocks. She wrapped him in her wool cloak and lit a fire with flint. Then she chewed willow bark into a paste, pressing it into his wounds the way her grandmother had taught her. The bullet grazes on his side and thigh had been poorly patched. Whoever left him to die had intended it. As the fire flickered and he lay unconscious, she studied his face. He wasn't old, maybe in his 40s. Lines creased his forehead, and a jagged scar ran from his temple to his ear. His hands were rough and calloused, but his mouth had moved so gently when he whispered that name, Clara. Why had he said it to her? She sat cross-legged in the corner of the shelter, hugging her knees to her chest. The mountains were quiet again, but the silence now felt heavy. Buried in the earth, left to die. What kind of man suffered that fate? Naya's thoughts churned. Her people had long feared the cattle barons, ranchers who drove their herds through sacred lands, cutting off streams and stealing pasture. Her own father had died resisting them, his name barely spoken now among the tribe's elders. And yet here she was, saving one. When the man stirred again, he mumbled more names in his fever. Tommy, Jesse, Clara again. Then something about a river and a contract. Naya soaked a rag and pressed it to his lips, helping him drink. His eyes fluttered open briefly, and for a moment he looked at her, not through her, but at her as if recognizing something in her face. He tried to speak again, but his throat was too dry. Still, his eyes burned with something between sorrow and shock. Naya whispered to him in Apache, calming him, even though she knew he likely didn't understand. Something in her heart told her she couldn't walk away, not yet. Not until she knew who he was, and why he said that name. She didn't know that this decision, this moment in the woods, would unravel everything she thought she knew about her family, her past, and her place in the world. All she knew was that he wasn't a ghost, but his. Words might as well have come from the dead. Naya hadn't slept. The fire inside the lean-to crackled low, its warmth barely cutting through the icy morning air. Outside, a mist hung in the pines like a spirit that refused to leave. Inside, the man she had dragged from the dirt still teetered between life and death. She had changed the dressings twice through the night. His wounds were worse than she'd thought. Gunshot grazes to his side and thigh, deep bruises along his ribs, and a swollen lump at the back of his skull. Whoever had buried him had done so in rage and fear. He muttered in his sleep, sweat clinging to his brow. Names kept tumbling from his cracked lips. Names she didn't know. Tommy, Jesse, Jacob, Clara. Tell her I never blamed her. Never. Naya knelt beside him, dipping a rag into a pot of warm water. As she wiped his face, she couldn't stop thinking about what he'd whispered when she first uncovered him. Tell Clara. I forgive her. That name again. Clara. Her mother had once mentioned that name long ago, before sickness stole her voice. Clara had been a shadow in every story. Someone her mother both missed and mourned, someone tied to a pain she never explained. Naya had once asked her grandmother who Clara was, but the old woman only clicked her tongue and spat at the fire. Now a half-dead cattleman was whispering that same name, like it haunted him too. Who was this man? She studied him again. His beard had grown in patches, flecked with gray. His skin, under the grime, was sun-weathered and scarred. Not just any rancher. He'd seen war, hardship, and his hands, calloused and nicked, belonged to a man who had worked and fought his whole life. She had no answers, but one thing was clear: he was someone important. And someone wanted him dead. By midday, his fever broke. His eyes opened, blinking slowly against the dim light of the shelter. For a long moment, he just stared at the wooden beams above him, his breathing shallow. Then he turned his head. His eyes met hers. At first, confusion. Then, recognition, or something deeper. A sorrow buried so far down it made Naya uncomfortable. You? He rasped. Naya nodded slowly, unsure what to say. You pulled me out, he said. From the ground. She nodded again. You were buried, left for dead. He coughed, and it racked his entire body with pain. She poured him a bit of water and helped him sip. Name? He asked. Naya. He closed his eyes. Apache? Yes. He didn't seem surprised. She waited, let the silence stretch. Then finally asked, What's your name? He hesitated. Then, Clint Maddox. Naya's heart skipped. Maddox. She'd heard that name before. One of the richest cattle barons west of Lincoln, with land stretching to the Texas line. Her tribe considered the Maddox family dangerous, ruthless. Her father had once cursed the name, saying no Apache ever. Got mercy from them. And now one of them lay at her feet alive because of her. I found you in the forest, she said. You were nearly gone. He gave a faint, bitter chuckle. I was gone. Should have stayed that way. Who did it? She asked quietly. Clint's eyes darkened. He looked away. Doesn't matter. It matters if they're looking for you. He hesitated again. Then he spoke, his voice low and raspy. Family. A man doesn't get buried alive by strangers. It takes someone who knows you. The air grew heavier between them. She wanted to ask more, why he'd said Clara's name, what connection he had to her mother, but something in his face told her he wasn't ready. Not yet. Later that evening, while he drifted into a restless sleep, Naya slipped outside to gather more firewood. As she walked, her mind raced. Clint Maddox. That name could bring trouble. If the white men searching for him found out she was hiding him, she and her tribe could pay dearly. And if her own people discovered what she was doing, Nursing a cattle baron back to life, they might see it as betrayal, but she couldn't turn away now. Not until she knew why her mother's name lived in his mouth. When she returned to the shelter, Clint was tossing slightly, caught in another fevered dream. She caught the words again. Tell Clara she was right. I should have listened. Naya crouched beside him and whispered, "Who are you to her?" But Clint didn't answer. His brow furrowed. His lips moved. But all that came out was one word: daughter. Naya's breath caught in her throat. Was he talking to her, or about someone else? Either way, the truth was buried deep and she would have to dig it out. By the next morning, Clint Maddox was strong enough to sit up barely. Naya had torn strips from her old shawl to make new bandages and fed him bone broth she'd begged from her grandmother's cook fire, claiming it was for a wounded dog. Lying came hard to her, but this truth was too strange for the tribe to understand. Clint's blue eyes studied her now, their sharpness returning inch by inch. His skin was still pale, his hand shaking when he reached for the cup, but his gaze never wavered. You Apache? He asked again. She gave a nod, cautious. Who's your mother? The question slammed into her like a stone to the chest. Her hands froze. She set the wooden bowl down beside the fire and rose without answering. I asked, I heard you. She snapped, more harshly than intended. She didn't owe him that. Not yet. He leaned back against the wall, wincing. Sorry, he muttered. I'm not used to asking questions without getting answers. Too many years as the one barking orders. Naya's voice was soft but bitter. That's what men like you are used to, isn't it? Giving orders, taking land, killing when things don't go your way. His eyes narrowed. Is that what you think I am? I don't know what you are. She crossed her arms. But I know your name, Maddox. My father used to spit it like a curse. Clint's face drained of what little color remained. Your father's name? He asked after a long moment. Lo, she replied. He was of the mountain people. He died. When I was a child, fighting cattlemen who drove their herds into our sacred hunting grounds. Clint closed his eyes, the breath leaving him like someone had kicked it out. Clara loved him. He whispered. Nay took a step back. What? He looked up, and this time his voice cracked with something too raw to be fake. Clara was my sister. Silence. The world seemed to narrow around Naya until all she could hear was the wind moaning through the pine trees outside. You're lying. No, Clint said. She left when she was 17. Said she didn't belong in our world anymore. Said the people we called savages treated her with more kindness than her own family ever had. She followed a warrior named Lo into the wilderness. Naya's lips parted, but no words came. I didn't understand it then, Clint went on. I called her a traitor. Told her she was disgracing our family. I didn't know what she'd seen, what she'd suffered. He rubbed a hand over his face, rough with stubble. Years passed. Rumors came and went. I thought she was dead. Then a letter came. No return address. Just a few words. I had a daughter. She is brave. Her name is Naya. That was 10 years ago. Naya's throat felt tight. Her knees buckled. And she sat hard on the cold earth floor. She never told me, she whispered. She wanted to. She must have tried. Clint's eyes glistened with regret. But I never wrote back. I was too proud, too angry. And by the time I tried to find her, it was too late. I didn't even know where to start. I only remembered Loha's name. Naya. Stared at the fire, blinking hard. All this time, she thought her mother had been a quiet woman with a broken heart and a distant past. She had no idea that past had a name, a brother, and a family legacy soaked in violence and guilt. You buried her name in the ground, Naya said at last. And now you're the one who was buried. Clint gave a humorless chuckle. Fair. Enough, She looked over at him, searching for deception. But all she saw was weariness and shame. "If you're telling the truth," she said carefully, "then why were you left to die? Who wanted you gone?" Clint's jaw tightened. "Man I trusted. Kin. The same ones who told me to keep my mouth shut when they raided Apache camps. The same ones who carved up land stolen through lies and blood." Naya's chest rose and fell with anger and confusion. She didn't know whether to scream, cry, or run. But she didn't move. Clint met her eyes. "I don't know what I am too. You, Naya, I won't pretend to be something good, but I'm here. And I'm still breathing. And if there's anything I can do to make up for what I was, then start by telling the whole truth," she said. "Everything." And in the dying firelight, he nodded. The next morning, Naya and Clint sat side by side on opposite ends of the flickering fire. The mountain air was cold, but the heat between them wasn't from the flames. It was from the story Clint was finally ready to tell. "I was 21, he began. My father, Henry Maddox, had just handed me the deed to the Eastern Ranch, the one that butted right up against Apache land. Back then, it was considered generous to offer a peace trade. My sister Clara? She saw what was coming long before the rest of us did." He paused, watching the fire as if he could see ghosts dancing inside it. "She warned my father not to expand the herds. Said it would provoke the mountain people. But my father wouldn't listen. His friends were land barons, surveyors, and politicians. They saw your people as little more than shadows in the trees." Naya stayed quiet. She'd heard this story before, but from the other side. Her grandfather had been a tribal elder. Her father had died trying to stop that same herd from crossing their winter hunting trail. "I was young," Clint said, eyes clouding. "Too proud, too full of my father's words. When Clara told me she loved a warrior named Lowe, I told her. She was insane, said she'd shame the family." "You were wrong," Naya said softly. He nodded. "I was, but I didn't see it then. I didn't see much at all until the night the raid happened." Naya straightened. She'd never heard the full truth of what happened that night, not even from her grandmother. "It was supposed to be a warning," Clint said. "That's what they told me. My uncle, Eli Maddox, and some hired guns rode out with torches and rifles. I wasn't even supposed to be there, but I went along." He clenched his fists. "They stormed the Apache camp. Not just warriors, women, children. My uncle shot anyone who ran. One of them was a boy. Couldn't have been older than 8. Naya's throat tightened. "That night broke Clara," Clint continued. "She left for good. She said we'd become the monsters she once feared. And she was right." He turned to Naya then, eyes hollow. "Your grandfather, he died in that raid. I didn't pull the trigger, but I didn't stop it either." Naya's heart pounded. Part of her had known. Still, hearing it from his lips made it real in a way that burned. "You buried more than one man that day," she whispered. "You buried your own sister's soul." "I know." Clint's voice cracked. "And I've been paying for it ever since." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Outside the shelter, wind sighed through the trees, carrying the sound of distant horses. Naya's ears perked. She crawled to the edge of the lean-to and scanned the woods. 2 riders were heading down the trail, white men, rifles strapped to their saddles. She ducked back inside. "Search parties," she said. "They're closing in." Clint's face hardened. "They're not here to save me. If anything, they want to finish the job." "Why?" He hesitated. "Then, because I was going to tell the truth." He reached into his satchel, still crusted with dirt and blood. From inside it, he pulled out a folded contract, sealed with a red wax stamp. The edges were charred. Burn marks licked across the coinstice. Paper like it had been pulled from a fire. "It's a land deal," he explained. signed by my father and a federal agent. Shows that the Maddox family knew they were trespassing. That the original treaty was forged. If I went public with it, you'd lose everything, Naya said. He nodded. And the others? They'd lose more. Control, legacy, wealth. So they decided it was easier to bury me. Naya stared at the document, at the familiar government seal, at the names written in elegant script. This would change everything, she whispered. If people saw this, they'd have to reckon with the truth, Clint said. But the men I rode with, they won't let that happen. And if they find out you helped me, they'll kill us both, she finished. Silence again. Then Naya's voice firm, clear. Then we don't let them find us. Clint looked at her. You're staying? I'm not doing it for you, she said. I'm doing it for my mother. For the truth she never got to speak. For the people buried in the ground while others built fortunes on top of their bones. A flicker of something passed across Clint's face, regret. Maybe even gratitude, but he didn't say a word. Naya stood and picked up the satchel. We move at night. There's a canyon west of here. My mother took me there once. No one knows how to cross it but me. Clint managed a thin smile. You're your mother's daughter, she nodded. And you're not going to die until we make sure the world knows who buried you alive. Naya knew what she was doing could cost her everything, her family's trust, her safety, even her place among her people. Yet she kept moving, guiding Clint Maddox through shadowed trails only she remembered. By the third night, they were deep. In the high woods, the scent of pine heavy in the cool air and the stars overhead watching in still silence. Clint's steps were slow. Though his strength had returned enough to walk, every limp reminded Naya how close to death he'd been, and how close he still was to danger. He didn't speak much, but his eyes, gray-blue like storm clouds, never stopped scanning the horizon. He knew someone was coming. So did she. They made camp beneath a cluster of stone outcrops, hidden from the open sky. The fire was small, smokeless. Naya warmed a pan of pine needle tea over the embers as Clint leaned back against a boulder, his breath short. You're quiet, he said finally. I'm thinking. About what? Naya didn't look at him. About how my people would treat me if they knew I was saving a man named Maddox. About how my grandmother would weep if she knew I'd given you medicine and food. About how I used to wonder why my mother cried in her sleep when she thought. No one was listening. Clint swallowed hard. You don't owe me anything, Naya. But I do owe the truth something, she said softly. And for better or worse, you're part of it. When dawn came, they moved again, quiet and slow. But the land began to change. The open woods gave way to scrub-covered hills, the ground growing rockier. The trail narrowed until it split at a fork shaped like a V. Naya stopped. This way, she said, pointing to the steeper path. Clint looked at her. You sure? No one else would take this route, she replied. It leads to the canyon. But as they made their descent, she felt it. A shift in the wind. A prickle at the back of her neck. The brush behind them rustled not with animals, but with rider's dot. She turned just in time to see the glint of sunlight on rifle barrels. Down! She hissed, grabbing Clint and pulling him behind a boulder. 2 bullets cracked through the air, splitting bark above their heads. Clint groaned in pain as his wounded leg gave out, and Naya yanked him deeper into the rocks. From their cover, they could see 3 riders, their faces familiar from old wanted posters. Bounty men, hired killers, and worst of all, Clint's own nephew Jeb Maddox. There's your reward, Clint muttered. Family loyalty in the Maddox line. They'll kill us both, Naya whispered. And make it look like justice. Clint nodded grimly. You should go. You've got time to slip out through the trees. No, she said sharply. You're not dying out here like an animal. Not again. You can't carry me. Then We'll find another way. They crawled along the rocks until they reached a narrow crevice leading into a dry ravine. Clint nearly passed out from the pain, but Naya urged him on. The bounty riders shouted from behind, their horses crashing. Through the brush, then a shot. Clint collapsed beside her, clutching his arm. Blood bloomed through his sleeve. Naya screamed, but he gritted his teeth. "Keep moving," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm not stopping now." She helped him stand, half carrying him through the stone pass until the terrain opened. Up and the earth dropped off sharply. The canyon dotted yawned before them like a jagged scar across the land, the far side barely visible. Wind howled between the cliffs, and the trail thinned to a crumbling ledge. "We cross here," Naya said. Clint looked at her, stunned. "You're out of your mind." "Trust me," she said, her voice shaking. There was a way, a hidden ridge. Beneath the cliff edge, used only by hunters in her tribe, known to those who'd walked it barefoot in the dark. Naya helped Clint lower himself onto the ledge, her heart pounding. One wrong move, and they'd fall. But behind them, they heard the bounty riders dismounting. Jeb's voice echoed cold and clear. "Uncle Clint, no use running anymore. That girl's not worth your life." Clint paused. Naya did too. "Go," she whispered. "Don't stop." They reached the far side just as the sun dipped low. The trail disappeared behind a curtain of brush, and Naya pulled Clint into a narrow, dry cave safe for now. Inside, he slumped to the ground, blood soaking through his shirt, his chest rising and falling. "You saved me," he said, dazed. "Again." "You're not safe yet," she replied, kneeling beside him. "But you will be. I didn't bury you, Clint Maddox. I pulled you out, so don't make me regret it." He looked at her, eyes filled with something deeper than pain. "You're your mother's fire," he said, "and your father's spine." She nodded once. "And I'm not done yet." Clint Maddox was unconscious again by nightfall. The bleeding from his shoulder had slowed, but his face was pale, and he mumbled in his sleep half-formed names, fragments of memories, and a word he kept repeating, "Clara, Clara." Naya sat just beyond the cave mouth, legs pulled to her chest, listening to the wind curl around the canyon like a whisper from the past. She'd bound his arm with fabric soaked in pine sap and ash, the best she could do without her grandmother's full medicine bundle. But something told her she'd need more than herbs and prayer to keep this man alive. He was hunted, broken, full of truths, too heavy to carry Dot, and yet he'd survived. That meant something. Her eyes drifted toward his saddlebag, still half buried, beneath his coat. He'd clutched it like a lifeline through the woods. Something inside it mattered to him. Maybe to her, too. She crawled toward it, unbuckled the worn leather flap, and slipped her hand inside. There were bullets, a broken compass, a map marked with blood, and a book, small, leather-bound, worn smooth at the edges. She pulled it free. Initials CM were pressed into the cover, not Clint's, but Clara Maddox. Naya's breath caught. She opened the journal slowly. The first few pages were neat, precise, Clara's handwriting, elegant and flowing, the kind of penmanship taught to white girls in faraway boarding schools. But as the entries continued, the script grew looser, wilder, more urgent. She read, in silence, fingers trembling as the words painted a truth she had never been told. March 3rd. They won't listen. Father says the treaty is fair, but I know it's forged. He and Eli want more cattle, more land, and they won't stop until they've taken everything. Lowe says we should leave now. I want to believe peace is still possible. March 9th, I told Clint everything. He wouldn't believe me at first, but I saw it in his eyes. He knows I'm right. Still, he stays silent. Loyalty or fear, I can't tell. March 15th. The raid is coming. I begged them not to go. I begged Clint to stop them. He just turned away. said it was out of his hands. But his hands are bloodied too, even if he never lifts a weapon. March 20th Low is gone. So is my father. All because of their greed. I can't return. I won't. I will raise my daughter in the shadow of the mountain and tell her the truth. They tried to bury. Tears blurred Naya's vision. She hadn't realized her hands were shaking until the journal slipped from her lap. Her mother had known. She had tried to stop it. And Clint had known, too, and failed to act. But he'd carried the journal. Not just carried it, kept it close. Through all those years, that meant something. Guilt, maybe. Or penance. Or some final, desperate hope that one day the words inside it would matter. Naya turn the last page. If anyone finds this, know this. I loved both my homes. I walked between two worlds and never belonged fully to either. But my daughter Naya is stronger than I ever was. She will carry what I could not. A tear fell onto the page. Naya brushed it away quickly, but the ink had already smeared. It felt like a signature, a final goodbye. When she turned back toward Clint, he was awake. Pale, weak but watching her. "You read it," he said, voice rough. She nodded. "Why did you keep it?" "Because it's the only honest thing my family ever left behind." She studied him for a long time. "You knew she was right. And you did nothing." "I was a coward," he admitted. "I thought loyalty to blood meant silence. I didn't realize silence was betrayal until it was too late. And now?" she asked. "Now I want the truth to be louder than the lies we built our lives on." He coughed, then nodded toward the saddlebag again. "There's more." Naya reached in again and pulled out the land contract, torn, scorched at the corners, but still legible. Her mother's journal had been emotion. This was evidence. "If we show this to the right people," Clint said, "it could force the land office to reopen the case. Maybe even return some of what was stolen. It won't bring back your grandfather or Lowe, but it might stop them from burying more truth." Naya held both the journal and the contract in her lap. For the first time, she held both parts of her heritage in her hands. She looked at Clint. "If I help you bring this to light, I'll be betraying my tribe. But if I stay silent, I'll be betraying my mother." He met her gaze. "Then we do it together," he said, "and we let the truth speak for itself." She nodded. Not for him. Not even for Clara. But for the silence that had gone on too long. The sky was heavy with low clouds as Naya scanned the trail from the cave mouth. A hawk circled high above, its cry sharp and sudden. That was her sign, her warning. The riders were close. She didn't need to see them to know who they were. Clint lay inside the cave, still fevered but conscious, clutching the shoulder she'd bandaged again. The blood was drying, but he wouldn't be lifting a rifle any time soon. They'd have to run. Again, she turned back inside. "They've found us." Clint didn't flinch. "Jeb?" Naya nodded. "At least two others with him." Clint sighed, half pain, half exhaustion. He was always Eli's shadow. Greedy, mean, proud of the name, but blind to what it stood for. "He's not blind." "Now," Naya said, "he knows you've got that contract. And he'll kill to make sure no one ever sees it." Clint pulled the leather bag close and rested his hand over it. "Then we give him something he doesn't expect." They left the cave in silence, traveling along a hidden deer path Naya had followed since childhood. It wound through pine and stone, hugging the side of the mountain above the canyon. It was dangerous, crumbling in places, but it was also invisible from below. Clint limped behind her, gripping the trees for balance, jaw clenched against the pain. Naya watched him carefully. He was growing weaker again, the climb draining him. He was tough, but even the toughest man couldn't outrun death forever, and death was chasing them on horseback. By noon, they heard hoofbeats in the canyon below. Naya. And Clint dropped flat beneath a ledge. Peering over the edge, she saw them clearly, Jeb Maddox, hard-eyed and confident, flanked by two bounty men with tobacco-stained beards and quick trigger fingers. They rode slowly, scanning the rocks. One of them stopped and shouted up toward the cliffs. "Jeb, smoke, fresh trail." Jeb turned his horse and looked up. Naya saw him squint-saw the moment he realized the game wasn't over. "There." "Close," Clint whispered. "They're hunting us like wolves." Naya muttered. Clint looked down at the canyon and then at the contract in his lap. "Then we don't give them the game they want." "What do you mean?" He reached into the bag, pulled out a small pouch of gunpowder and a bit of oil-soaked cloth. "We give them a decoy." He set the contract, wrapped tight in oilskin, into the pouch, then placed it under a slab of rock near the trail. "You're giving it up?" Naya asked, shocked. "No," he said. "The original's buried. This is a copy, enough to make them think they've won." Naya smiled. "You are smarter than you look." Clint grinned faintly, then winced. "Don't let that get around." They set the trap and climbed farther west, toward a ridge Naya had only been to once before, long ago with her mother. It led to a box canyon, a dead end for anyone who didn't know the rock wall's hidden tunnel. It was the last place she could think to go. By evening, the fire-lit trap exploded in the canyon below. Smoke curled into the sky, followed by cursing and shouting. "They found the decoy," Naya said. "Now they'll think the trail's gone." "Cold," Clint murmured, but her relief was short-lived. That night, as she helped Clint settle into the narrow cave passage near the canyon wall, she saw it a shadow above them. A silhouette on the ridge, one of the bounty men. Watching, she froze. He disappeared. Seconds later, but that was all it took. "They know," she whispered. "At least one does." Clint's face tightened. "Then they'll come tonight." Naya sat awake, dagger in hand, back pressed against the wall beside Clint. The fire was low, but her pulse was high. "I used to dream about this," she said suddenly. "Not the cave, not the hunt, but the moment I'd meet someone from my mother's past. Someone who could explain why she looked so sad when she thought no one noticed. I used to think they'd bring comfort, or answers." Clint looked at her. "Did I?" She shook her head. "You brought more questions." "I'll take that," he said quietly, "because I still have more answers." She turned to him. "Then tell me one." He looked her in the eye. "Your mother, she never stopped loving either of her homes. But she chose yours. And because of that, she saved what was still good in me. And what's good in you?" "That?" Truth sank into the silence like a stone into still water. Outside, a twig snapped. Naya rose slowly, dagger ready. The hunters were no longer far away, and the next move could cost them everything. The cave was too quiet. Naya crouched by the entrance, blade glinting in the glow of dying embers. Clint lay behind her, half asleep but still breathing. A pistol clutched loosely in his left hand. His right side, the wounded shoulder, had gone completely stiff. If the bounty men charged in, he wouldn't be able to lift that gun fast enough, which meant she'd have to be the first line of defense. The twig snap had come from just above the ridge. She knew the terrain, a narrow animal path led down toward the cave mouth, lined with shale. Even a careful step would slip. If they came now, they'd come fast and loud. She listened. Nothing but wind. Until a sharp whistle. Low, cruel, human. Naya's chest went tight. She leaned toward Clint. "They're here." He nodded faintly, trying to sit up. "How many?" "I heard one. That means at least two." Clint gritted his teeth. "Give me the pistol." "If they get past you, you won't be shooting anyone," she said. "You'll get us both killed with that arm." He managed a weak grin. "Bossy, just like your mother." She ignored him and pressed the pistol against his chest. "One shot, that's all. You fire it if they get past me, not before." He Didn't argue this time. Naya stepped outside into the cold night air. The stars were veiled behind thin clouds, and the moon cast a ghostly glow over the stones. She moved like a spirit herself, silent, swift, and low to the ground. The whistling came again. Closer. She crouched behind a boulder and spotted him. A bounty man, not Jeb, but one of his thugs. Big, wide shoulders, a long knife strapped across his chest, his rifle raised and scanning. He stepped toward the cave mouth. She moved before she could talk, herself out of it, a rock in her hand hurled. Hard and fast hit the shale behind him with a sharp crack. He turned instinctively, and that was all she needed. Nia lunged. She hit him low, slicing behind the knee with her blade. The man roared in pain, swinging his rifle like a club, but she ducked. His gun clattered against the rocks. He grabbed for her throat too slow. She plunged the blade into his side. He collapsed, choking on his own breath. One down. A second shadow moved near the ridge. She turned just in time to see the muzzle flash, crack. The bullet split the air where her head had been. She rolled behind a stone, gasping. Dirt kicked up beside her. Another shot. That had to be Jeb. She waited, breathing hard. Hard hammering. And then another sound. Behind her. A third man, approaching the cave from the blind side. She spun. Too late. The man was already inside. Clint heard him first. He opened his eyes to see a tall shape step inside the cave. Hat brim low, rifle pointed right at his chest. "Evening, Uncle," the man drawled. Jeb. Clint didn't move. "Didn't think you had the nerve to do it yourself," Jeb smirked. "Oh, I got plenty of nerve. What I ain't got is time for ghosts. You were supposed to stay buried. Seems your boys didn't dig deep enough." Jeb stepped closer. "Give me the contract." Clint's hand inched toward the saddlebag beside him, slowly, deliberately. "You shoot me now," Clint said, "and you never find it. Never know if it's the real one. Never know who already has a copy." Jeb narrowed his eyes. Behind him, a flicker of movement. Naya. She slipped through the narrow crevice, crouching low behind a stack of crates they'd used as cover. She saw Jeb, his back to her, the gun aimed at Clint. She didn't hesitate. She threw the blade. It missed, but it hit the wall beside Jeb's head with enough force to make him flinch and turn. That was all. Clint needed. He fired. Boom. The sound echoed through the cave like thunder. Jeb dropped, his shoulder torn open. Naya ran in, grabbed the rifle, and kicked it away. Clint collapsed back against the wall, groaning. "Didn't miss," he muttered. "Still got one good arm." Naya looked down at Jeb. He was alive, barely clutching his bleeding shoulder, eyes filled with hatred. "You'll hang for this," he snarled. "You and your little half-breed girl." Clint struggled to sit up. "That half-breed saved my life. And she's more Maddox than you'll ever be." Naya stared down at him, chest rising and falling. She wanted to kill him. Everything in her body screamed for it. But Clara's words echoed in her heart. "She will carry what I could not." Naya turned to Clint. "Tie him up. Then we ride." 2. "Where?" She held up the journal and the real contract. "To Lincoln. To the judge. To the truth." They had no more time to run. Now they had to fight. The morning air was bitter and dry as Naya tightened the rope around Jeb Maddox's wrists. He sat slumped against a tree stump just outside the cave, his bloody shoulder wrapped in a torn blanket. Every glare he gave her was poison, but she met it without flinching. Clint, though weak, stood nearby, leaning against a boulder for balance. One arm was pressed against his wounded side. His face was drawn and hollow, but his voice was steady. "You tried to run," he said to Jeb, "and she ended you. Quicker than I did. I should have buried you deeper," Jeb spat. "You did your best," Clint replied. "Didn't work." By noon, they were moving. Naya rode point, her mother's journal tucked tightly in her satchel. Clint followed. Behind her on a swayback gelding, one hand holding the reins, the other clutching the original land contract inside his coat. Behind them, tied to his saddle horn and glaring with every jostle, rode Jeb. They cut through switchbacks and ravines, crossing lands stained by betrayal. Every mile closer to Lincoln felt heavier, not just from danger, but from history. The truth they carried wasn't just on paper, it was in blood. Bones and memory died at a shallow creek. They stopped to rest. Clint eased off his horse and lowered himself carefully onto a fallen log. "You sure this will work?" he asked Naya. "You said the judge in Lincoln was honest." "He was my father's enemy. That's why I trust him." "But it's been years." "Then we'll remind him," she said. "This land was never theirs to own." Clint looked at her. For a long moment. "You remind me of her, my mother?" He nodded. "She was brave, stubborn, fierce in quiet ways." "I only ever saw the quiet," Naya said softly. "She never talked about you." Clint didn't speak for a while. She probably didn't think I deserved to be remembered. Naya didn't argue, because deep down, maybe he didn't. They rode through dusk, the sky streaked with lavender and smoke. Clint's strength began to falter, but he refused to stop. Every jolt of the trail pulled fresh pain from him, but he held on. "I buried the truth," he muttered once, almost to himself. "She tried to dig it out. Now it's our turn." "You sure you're ready to face them?" Naya asked. "No," Clint said, "but I'm going anyway." They reached the outskirts of Lincoln by midnight. It was quiet lamplight flickering in windows, dust curling in the street like a restless spirit. The courthouse stood at the far end, its old stone facade. Watching over the town like a sentinel, Clint swayed in his saddle. "Get me to Judge Walters," he said. "I'll get you through the door," Naya replied. "After that you speak." Jeb stirred behind them, still tied to his horse. "You think they'll believe you?" "They'll believe me. I'll say you kidnapped me. Say this girl's lying. She's Apache. They'll hang her before the sun rises." Naya turned. Her voice was a blade. "Try it." Jeb went silent. The courthouse was locked, but Clint knew the night guard. An old man named Beasley, half drunk and nearly blind, recognized Clint by voice and let them in without much fuss. Soon after, the judge was roused, grumbling and furious. Until he saw Clint's condition. Then everything changed. They sat in the empty courtroom under low burning lamps. Clint's bloodied shirt, Naya's mud-caked boots, and the smell of sweat and gunpowder filled the air. Clint dropped the contract on the table. "This was signed by Henry Maddox and a federal land agent, proof that our claim over the Apache hunting lands was illegal. The original copy, sealed, witnessed." The judge's brow furrowed. "Where did you get this?" "My sister," Clint said, "and her daughter. She died trying to protect what was hers. Now we're here to make sure the truth outlives the lies." Then Naya stepped forward and laid the journal beside the contract. "My mother," she said. Her name was Clara Maddox. She left this town for love and for justice. These are her words. You read them. You tell me she doesn't deserve to be heard." The judge sat down slowly, opened the journal, and began to read page after page. He read until his face darkened with shame. When he looked up, his voice was low. "This is enough to burn half the Maddox land deeds, and enough to put some powerful men behind bars." "That's the idea," Clint said. The judge looked at Jeb. "And him?" Clint's voice was firm. "He tried to finish what my father started. He buried me alive." Jeb opened his mouth to speak, but the judge raised a hand. "Save it for your trial." As dawn broke over Lincoln, Naya stood at the courthouse window. Clint sat nearby, half asleep, save for the first time in weeks. For the first time in decades, perhaps. And outside, the wind carried the faintest smell of smoke. not the smoke of fire or blood, but of something being rebuilt. Week passed. Lincoln was no longer silent. The courthouse bustled with whispers and wagons, riders bringing news from across the territory. Word of the land contract in Clara Maddox's journal had spread like wildfire. People came to read copies of the documents themselves, posted outside the courthouse door, black ink on white pages, standing tall against generations of silence. Some men spat on them, others stood in stunned silence, but none looked away. Clint sat on the porch of the sheriff's office, a sling around his shoulder and his legs still stiff from the injury. He watched as a pair of federal marshals carried Jeb away in chains, loaded him into a prison wagon, and closed the gate with a heavy clang. "Funny thing about the truth," he murmured. "It doesn't stay buried forever." Naya stood beside him, arms crossed, her mother's leather-bound journal pressed to her chest. She said nothing, because everything that needed saying had already been done. That afternoon, the judge returned from the Capitol. He called Naya and Clint into the courthouse chambers again, this time under sunlight, not lamplight. He looked between them, weary but determined. "Washington's reviewing the case. They've acknowledged that the original Apache treaty was violated. Land grants are frozen until they conduct a full inquiry." Clint straightened. "That'll take years." "Yes," the judge said, "but now there's a record. And the Maddox name won't be carved in stone anymore. It'll be etched in shame." He turned to Naya. "Your mother's words, they moved them." "They moved me." Naya blinked back tears. Then they did what she could never live to see. The judge reached into his desk and slid a folded paper across the table. "This is a recommendation for you, Miss Naya. It proposes that the tribal council and the courts recognize you as legal heir to the Clara Maddox estate." She stared at the paper. She wasn't sure what hurt more, receiving it now, or knowing her mother had died believing she never would. Later, Clint approached her on the porch of the inn. He moved slow, but with purpose. "I'm heading west," he said. "There's land near the Rio Chalmaquayat open. Maybe I'll build a cabin. Maybe plant something for once." Naya looked up. "You could stay?" Clint gave a sad smile. "Too many ghosts. Too many doors I helped close. Best I walk where they can't follow." He paused, then added, "Unless you need me here." She met his gaze. "No," she said softly. "You were the ghost. I brought you back. Now it's time I walk forward. Without you." He nodded, proud. Not of himself, but of her. He pressed something into her hand. She opened it. The pocket watch. His father's. "I don't want it," she said. "Neither do I," Clint replied. "But it belongs to the one person in this family who finally did something right." Clint Maddox rode out of Lincoln alone that evening, never looking back. And Naya? She walked to the edge of town, to the small hill just beyond the church where her mother had once left a prayer bundle tied to an oak tree. She buried the journal there, wrapped in cloth, tucked between stones, with one final message scratched into the inside cover. "The land remembers the blood, but it will remember the truth." She stood for a while, the wind lifting the ends of her hair, the sun slipping low behind the buttes. The same wind that had carried her ancestors' cries now carried something gentler, her mother's name, whispered like a blessing. Clara. She closed her eyes. Life had ended in silence, but its truth had finally been shouted into the light. And Naya Maddox of the Mountain People walked down the hill with nothing to hide, only a name to carry forward.